On behalf of Paraclete Press, welcome to this Paraclete Music Talkback with Jim Jordan and David Halls. My name is Rachel McKendry and I'm the publicist here at Paraclete. We're so thrilled to have you with us today. Throughout the talkback, I really encourage you to ask questions. Please take a moment to find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit any thoughts or questions you might have for David or Jim throughout the talkback. And I'll also be posting links in the chat bar that you can copy and paste to access and purchase the music that you'll hear today as well. A heads up that there is a special coupon code, Halls 2020, for 20% off multiple copy orders of all the pieces you'll hear today. I know you'll want to take advantage of that, and we hope you do. And finally, a recording of this talkback will be available later on YouTube for your reference and to share with anyone who couldn't make it. Now I'd like to introduce Jim Jordan. Jim is the music editor and Gregorian chant specialist for Paraclete Press. He is an organist at the Church of the Transfiguration in Orleans, Massachusetts, and he is a lover of all things Star Trek. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. And you know, I think that Star Trek part is actually fairly important, you know?
Maybe we should mention that first next time.
I know, I think maybe that we actually should, and maybe I'll try to remember next week to wear my Star Trek cufflinks just to prove to people, or have the proper coffee mug, one way or the other, you know, so they can see that. So
absolutely.
Anyway, thanks very much. Well, this is great to be able to get together again today. This is actually the fourth in our series of these music talkbacks, and they've been great fun. And today, I'm sure will be equally fun as we talk with David Halls. Now, I first met David in the summer of 2007 while studying chant with Mary Berry in Cambridge, England. I grabbed a train one day and went down to Salisbury, and David and I had a marvelous time. But we've actually been publishing David's work since I think the first piece we're going to hear today was published, goodness, back in 2002. So we've had pieces for quite some time. Anyway, David is the music director, organist at Salisbury Cathedral in England. And thank you for being here, David. And actually, I do want to ask you right off the bat to tell us exactly how long you have been at Salisbury, because as we were talking beforehand, your biography, I think, says it a little differently than what the real case is.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be here. Thank you. I'm most honored to be talking to you today. Well, I arrived here as a young man, not with much hair, at the age of 22, having just come out of Oxford University. I did a year at Winchester, but I came here when I was 22 in 1985, and I was assistant organist of the cathedral, playing this fabulous Father Willis organ here. So it was a dream come true, really, and working for a first-rate choir trainer called Richard Seal. And unusually, as I say, I did my time from 1985, and I was very happy. I was married, I got children. And in 2005, unusually, I think, for a cathedral setup these days, I was promoted up to be director of music. Now, the sad thing is, of course, I do now less organ playing than I used to.
Right.
But that is the way it is. So that's
exactly. The job expanded the other direction.
It did. It did. Yeah. So, but obviously, I'm very happy here. It's a lovely place.
Oh, it's a fabulous place. But the other thing, which we'll talk about as we go along, is I think a lot of the pieces you've written have come out of a need right there at Salisbury that you've actually done. Well, let's take a listen to this first piece on the birthday of the Lord, which I must say has been in the Paraclete sample packet since the day it was published. So let's take a listen on the birthday of the Lord.
Amen.
David, every time I hear that anthem, I almost want to giggle because I have such good memories of playing that piece when we did the demo recording. But the other thing is, every time I hear the descant, I'm whisked right back over across the pond with you all.
Yeah, it's actually, I have to say, I'd forgotten how hard it is. It's quite tricky, isn't it, for the organist, and it's tricky for the choir, and very, very well sung and played there, I might say. It was in my sort of uneven phase when I was writing things in 5, 7.
Right, the days when John Rutter was writing his organ pieces like the Toccata in 7, exactly. You know, that kind of style, or the Wilcox carols, were really quite well known and being done by everybody.
Yeah, and aren't they so good? They really are so beautifully written by John, I think. He showed us how to do it in a way.
Yeah, kind of opened the door. But what's fascinating to me about that piece is that it has hard moments and it has easy moments. You know, the unisons aren't difficult. And frankly, one way that we've worked with these pieces, when we take them to reading sessions, we don't let anybody look at the music. We just sing the tune. Well, they grab onto that tune and they're captivated by it. And then they don't have to explain 5/4 and 7/8 and 6/8 and deal with all those multimetrics.
That's very clever. I must try that with my choir.
Well, that's actually something I learned from one of the other composers that we published. He said, just don't let them open the score. He said, sing it to them and make them sing it back.
I do believe with children of not telling them how hard something is.
Absolutely. I still remember I dearly loved my first piano teacher, but she told me when I was about 10 that it was harder to play in sharp keys than flats. And I'm now 50. And I'm now 57, and that still goes through my mind the first time I pick up with something with sharp keys.
That's interesting because I always think in flats, and I always improvise on the organ in flats.
In flats, and I do too. But you do have to be careful what you implant in those children's minds. Well, we're going to move on to another piece now. This "Teach Me, My God and King," the George Herbert text. Now, there's two things about this. For one, I fell in love with this when this first came out. I love so many other settings of this, which are very kind of victorious to begin with. But this is quite gentle to begin with, which I think is a very nice way to do it. But also, and we'll hear this when we get there, what you do under the words on page 5, because verse 4, you know, all may of thee partake, nothing can be so mean. Basically, nothing is too low, with which this tincture for thy sake will not grow bright and clean. You know, my head, me doing it. But then you have these basses doing this with these you know, like almost like a chant. A servant with this clause makes drudgery divine. And when I came to that, listening to it again, I thought, bingo. And that's such a high point of the piece. I don't know what your thoughts were, but tell us.
Yeah, I am pleased with this one in particular because you need to understand that George Herbert, and I'm sure you know a lot of his poetry, is an A-list celebrity round here, albeit at the 17th century. He was the rector of Bemerton, which is a small parish about 2 miles from Salisbury Cathedral. And he used to walk in every day to hear evensong.
Really?
Yeah. So we do a lot of George Herbert settings of one sort or another. There are settings by Britten, Walton, practically every composer. And of course, great hymns like Let All the World in Every Corner, as an example. This was commissioned by a church which is close to Salisbury as well, in a place called Wilton. And you're quite right about the plain-songy feel on page 5, because of course I'm up to my neck here in something called the Sarum Rite. Now, you're a plain song expert, so you know all about this. So a lot of what I write, if it isn't overtly based on plain song, it's somewhere lurking.
Exactly.
Below the surface, and it certainly is on page 5. It went down very well, this piece, actually, when it was performed.
Oh, well, let's take a listen to it. People should hear this. No, the simple fact that you give that a crescendo all the way to the end and pull that out, David, I- everybody has their own take on those words. That's what makes all the pieces so wonderful to do the various ones. But that struck all of us when we did that. I remember that in the demo recording, that it was so clear. Your 2 points, really the main point you're making is, why are you doing what you're doing?
Sure.
And that really is the emphasis that you give it.
But
So,
but another point might be that the words are infinitely better than the music, possibly. But
well, you know, we all, I think, and history will be the things that tell us that, and neither you nor I will be here to find out, unfortunately.
my choir have recorded that piece on a George Herbert disc, as it happens, and I've got a boy in the choir who took a breath during the last chord.
Oh,
and you can still hear it on the recording.
I know. Those...
My comments to him at the time were not recorded, I'm pleased to say.
And I can completely understand your position, given that I'm sure you were conducting and you were the composer. Not a good combination.
I won't name him.
Go for his sake. Well, okay, so the next one that we have on the list here is Never Weather Beaten Sail, the Thomas Campion text. Do you have any memory in what made you choose this text?
Yes, I do. This is to strike a more serious note. It was my privilege, a strange thing to say, to be present when Simon Ponsonby, to whom this is dedicated in his memory, when he died. I wasn't a close friend of his, but I was a close friend of a close friend of his. And these words I've always loved. I think one thing that is really cool is you have a composer like Campion who set his own words. I think that's kind of good. There are also other fine settings. There's a very good setting by Parry, and one you may not know, but one by Richard Shepherd, which is very beautiful. And I just wanted to set these words because I think they're just absolutely gorgeous. There are 2 verses, aren't there? And they are just, I always explain the words to my choristers whenever we sing whatever setting of these. And like, these words are so beautiful, you know, using the image of a ship.
Exactly. Well, we have an excerpt of this, which I'd like for folks to hear, but it's nice to hear that story, because I think, well, you'll hear it, all of you who are listening, that there's a change of, not only because of the text, but you can hear how David works differently with these words in the type of melody that he writes. So let's take a listen to this excerpt. In a way, David, you actually answered the question already about how you would teach this, because you explained the words to your choir when you bring it on to be done. But I think that's again, as it were, we're preaching to the choir with folks who are on with us today. But I do think sometimes all of us get caught up in our lack of rehearsal time, the speed with which we have to learn things. It happens to everybody regardless of their schedule at some point. And what really grabs a choir isn't necessarily the piece of paper and looking at that, but really you have to grab their hearts with the story of those words. And they're willing to, they'll follow you anywhere once you've done that.
You're right. I mean, I've got boys and girls, 2 separate choirs here, and we sing 9 services a week. So time, and that includes the Psalms of the day, of course. And you can't explain everything.
No,
there isn't time.
Right. Do you actually have do you have the kids beyond your daily rehearsal? Do you have them for classroom work, or how does that work?
No, I don't. I am merely in charge of the singing. Although there are occasions, I mean, touring is a good example of when you get to know the kids a bit better.
Right.
And there are sometimes, if I'm in a good mood, I might, tell them a joke or something, but it doesn't often. It doesn't happen often.
Well, there's no time, and you take the opportunities when you get them.
Yes.
Now, speaking of that, we're going to go now to a piece called Little Christ Jesus, which is trebles with an optional descant organ. Lovely work. Let's just take a listen. Dan, you want to go ahead and do that for us? David, I have to confess, I hear Zimbalstern with this piece going the whole time.
You do it. You just go ahead. I wrote that at the request of a schoolmistress who wanted something for her children to sing. So that was first sung actually by children up to the age of 8, I think. They were all very small. And
wow.
And of course, it was beautiful. It was just terribly innocent,
right, little cherubs singing. Well, the other thing that I know we've had happen occasionally over the years is we have folks whose choir demographics are changing all the time, but they love the piece, and they've reorchestrated this so that they'll have women, men, and unison, which I think is a terrific idea.
A great improvement, I'd say.
Well, why not use the piece? They love the piece, and if that's what their choir can do, I think it's a terrific thing.
It could, that little descant to take some bells, couldn't it? Some
Absolutely.
actual, just
Absolutely.
on the main beat.
I think this is again, we talked about this with Robert Lau a few weeks ago, this idea of taking the piece, honoring its structure, honoring its intent. But if you love the piece, look at your demographics and see what you can make work. Use your imagination.
I do it all the time here, I can assure you.
Oh, when we have done it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go now to your anthem for the preparation of the table. Wise and gracious God. This piece, well, I know people have found this piece useful over the years just because it continues to go out the door. Was there any particular background to the composition of this work?
Well, quite a lot of the pieces I write are done at people's requests. And this was for a large service in the cathedral, for which I was playing the organ, I think. It was a diocesan service, so the cathedral choir wasn't actually singing at it, but they wanted something which could be sung by, a good congregation, an educated musical congregation. So they wanted a new piece, and I wrote this, and we rehearsed it. I forget who took the rehearsal, but I was on the organ, and I think it fitted the bill. It was okay, and not too long,
Well, now that's a very interesting. So, did the congregation join in that rendition of it?
I think they did. It was some time ago now, wasn't it? Yes. Back in 2008 or 2009. Yes, I think we had put the music in the order of service. That was it.
Oh, how wonderful. So everybody listening to that, bear that in mind, because when you hear it, I think you'll see it's very, very singable very quickly. Dan, let's go ahead and listen to this. Wise and gracious God.
Wise and gracious God, you spread our table before us. Nourish your people with the word of life. And the
There's so many possible uses for that, but it's interesting when you said the thing about chant would be lurking around somewhere.
Yes, it's always
I hate to tell you, I think I could find a couple of tunes inside of this one. Actually, when I first heard it, I thought, well, was it Eric Routley's definition of a good hymn or on a new hymn is that it should sound vaguely familiar without quite being able to tell where you've heard it.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And when I first listened to this again, I thought, oh yeah, I remember that about this piece. But I do think that's something that people should remember when you get a piece like this, and knowing it now from the composer, that this is something to use with the congregation. I think it'd be terrific.
Well, if you can put the music in the order of service, I think they probably need that, don't they?
Yeah, they'd have to have permission, but we would grant that type of permission to do that for an event.
Yeah.
That is the type of thing we can do. Now we're going to go ahead.
Few funny chords there, just to keep everybody interested, aren't there? Just to
Oh, I know, but a little, as they say, a little pepper in the gumbo. That's just to keep it spiced up.
Free song.
Okay, now this next one is just plain fun to sing. Christ, whose glory fills the skies. And truthfully, coming up on Ascension, it's not a bad piece to have if anybody were doing these services, but certainly worth listening to for this time of year. Let's go ahead, Dan, hear this one. David, was there any story to that? I see you had dedicated to your friends, the Powells, but wondered if that was a commission or what that was.
It wasn't. It was not a commission actually, but they're dear friends of mine. And John was a chorister here back in the 1930s. So he's a good age now. Does that make sense? I think it does. That makes him pretty. He's well over 80.
Goodness.
I can't work it out. Maybe the 30s or 40s. Anyway, but what I would apologize for with a smile on my face is the bit on page 4 where it goes unaccompanied, where the word unaccompanied comes. That is a little conceit of mine. And one of my choristers, when we did this, said, why did you do that? Why did you stop the organ? And I said, because it says unaccompanied by thee. And I had to explain it about 6 times,
Oh dear.
And then I went on in a rather high-handed way and said, look, when you're composing music, nobody can really tell you what's right and what's wrong. You just do what you want.
Exactly. And so Dan is actually showing this again on the screen where you see this go away, because truthfully, you can tell something's coming when we turn to dark and cheerless as the morn, and you flip over into the minor mode right there with that flat coming back in. I absolutely love it. But then what a nice surprise on the word joyless.
Oh, yes.
When you get that sforz,
It's one of my favorite words in English, joy. It's got such a good start, whereas a lot of English words don't, do they?
They don't. They don't. But that one always grabs me, and the tenors had a great time with that particular note. I remember that when we recorded it. Now,
Excellent.
I don't want to lose time to hear "Oh Light of Light." Now, I've got to say personally, David, that this anthem, I mean, I just find this very moving, and I think it's worth for people hearing today, because sometimes I think we do run away, pardon me, a bit from things that look on paper a little bit scarier, but if you look at what you're actually doing, it's quite linear and makes great sense. But I was more interested if there was anything that caused you to write it.
Well, I suppose what made me write it was the fact that I love the piece by Tallis called
Mhm.
O Nata Lux,
Oh, Nota Lux, yeah.
of which this is a translation, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those, when we're singing so many services a week, just occasionally it's very useful to have very short, meaningful pieces.
Mm-hmm.
If Ye Love Me by Tallis, that's another one.
Yeah.
Meta Ave Verum, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought it'd be quite nice to set these English words, because I think they are beautiful, translated by Lawrence Housman. And it's a piece we do quite a lot, actually. It's just basically a lot of clusters, isn't it?
It is, but that's why I wanted to point this up to folks today, because it is, and at first glance you think, but if you follow the lines, they're quite linear, because you move in and out of those clusters, and you also match up your dynamic shaping with those clusters. So that's why I think there's a lot of things here that would aid the teaching of it. But first, let's take a listen to this. And I can only imagine hearing that in Salisbury.
We do quite a lot of processing in Salisbury for various services, and we often end up in what's called the Trinity Chapel, which is our east end behind the altar.
Mm-hmm.
And the acoustic there is very, very lively. So all those overlapping chords, they're kind of like written echoes.
Absolutely.
They all sort of merge and sound really good there. It needs a generous acoustic, I think.
It really does. I mean, we recorded this and we had about we had a little over 4 seconds the day that we did it. So, but it would never hurt to have a few more when you're doing this piece. It's absolutely beautiful.
It's what we English call covering fire.
Ah, that's an English. Very interesting. I've heard that in a different term for some of that writing called Anglican mist.
Yes,
and so I think we have different terms for things as we go. I actually want to jump. We're going to jump pieces here, and move over to "Give Me the Wings of Faith," just so we don't run out of time. And on this one, we actually don't do verse 2 because we have a repeat of music. So I think we get verses 1, 3, and 4. But let's take a listen to this, Dan, okay? I wanted to get to this one just because it's one of my favorite ones that you've written. Did this have a particular occasion?
Well, again, with all the services we do here, we have quite a lot of saints in England.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very useful Saints' Day piece, which isn't too hard.
Exactly.
So we wheeled this out a few times. Again, it's got a little bit of naughtiness, hasn't it? Page 3, they with united breath, where the choir's just in octaves. That's a very symbolic moment because they're supposed to be united, singing the same notes.
Well, I don't think, I know we laugh about it, but it's a wonderful way to teach kids, particularly text painting. That's not necessarily an obvious concept, as you just described in the previous piece, unaccompanied by thee. And I think it's nice when we have those moments. They're great fun, actually.
Well, I think just occasionally, one should have a bit of fun in one's life, because what we do in church music is fairly serious. There aren't many laughs, are there?
Mary,
to give it stories,
to give it some fun.
If one's composing, you can do this sort of thing, and they're unlikely to say it to your face. Let's be honest. although there are examples.
Indeed, there are. Well.
By the way, can I correct what my stupidity with my maths? My friend John Powell was a chorister under Walter Alcock, who left here. Well, he died in this house, in fact, in 1947. So I suppose John, to whom I dedicated one of the previous pieces, he must have been a chorister in the 1940s then.
40s then, right? That would be about right.
Just in case you're listening, John.
Want to get that right? Well, yeah. Some of you may have joined us the very first webinar where I focused in on organ music. And one of the pieces I presented that day was David's piece entitled Sound the Trumpet. And I don't want to not put one piece of his organ music into this webinar because it's great fun to play. And if you've got any version of a big high pressure reed, this is the perfect piece for it. The structure of the piece works well for I mean, you can use this for you could use this for any kind of recessional, I suppose, even at a wedding, and depending on how long you needed to go. But the quiet theme is very much in the tradition of what you'd expect with Elgar or William Walton. But it's just a blast. Now, what you're going to see now, though, is a video of this work. And that video was made in the Church of the Transfiguration in Orleans, Massachusetts. During this period of time, we've been doing videos with various pieces of music and putting out a series called A Gift of Listening, of which we made David's Sound the Trumpet a part. So this is Sound the Trumpet, his March for Organ. Wrong tune. Well, we'll see if we've got that. I think Dan may have to look for that. David, while he's looking, any background on this particular piece?
Well, you mentioned the two composers.
Oh,
Of course. Should we wait?
I don't know. It looks he's found it. Let's wait. Fun to play.
It sounds fantastic. Whoever played that, thank you. Really good.
It's just a joy to play it.
It's
And
you are quite right. There's a touch of Elgar and Walton and a sort of big tune. I suppose it's my take on a pomp and circumstance march, isn't it?
right,
With a
exactly.
sort of modern flavour. As you say, you need a good reed stop, and we have one here as well.
Oh, I know you do. Yes, yes, yes. I remember that. I remember that reed stop. And actually, we have 3 of those at either end of the 2 at one end and 1 at the other. So with that particular rendition, we could bring them both in at the end of the piece. So
Brilliant.
it's great fun to actually do something like that.
And here's a true story. I was going to play this, sort of premiere it at a recital of mine here in the cathedral, and the key of the piece is B flat major, I think.
Uh-huh.
The tuba decided to cipher on, I'll give you one guess which note.
A.
B flat.
B
So
flat.
I thought to myself, shall I try and transpose this and not play?
Oh
And I thought wisely, I thought, no,
no.
change the piece. So I changed and play something by someone else.
Have you ever since premiered it in the cathedral?
I have played it privately, but not in public.
Oh, you've got to. It's
Yeah.
too much fun.
I better start practicing it then.
Yeah, oh, it's great. Well, we've got one last piece to do here. And this actually, for those of you who have joined us before, have heard me talk about our Hymns of Praise Anthem series, where we have asked various composers who have worked with us over time to send a setting of a hymn in for SATB congregation choir, SATB choir organ, and a descant with an instrument that could be played, generally speaking, by a really fine high school player. And here's a setting of Ye Servants of God that David wrote for this series. So let's take a listen.
Joy
It's such fun to be able to have these types of hymns in that series. And of course, you can hear David's voice all over that now that we've been listening, to these pieces for the last hour. Sings extremely well and quite easily, and perfect for the trumpeter who would very much like to participate in the service.
It's a German tune I've always loved, that one. I love playing that on the organ. And
So do I.
So all the harmonies I used to put in for a last verse, I've just put into the anthem.
Exactly. Well, David, I'm sorry to say this hour has disappeared on us and we've got to come to a close. I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Well, thank you. It's been a complete joy for me.
So all of you, I know Rachel told you, but there are links to all of this music. You can go visit our webpage and you can, in order to find all of David's pieces. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, really. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Jim. And thank you to all of you who joined us today. You will be getting an email with a link to the recording of today's talkback and a link to all the music that was featured. A reminder that if you use the coupon code HALLS2020 on multiple copy orders on any of these pieces, you'll receive 20% off. Your choirs may not be getting together and singing right now, but we know they will be. And it's the perfect time to get your resources together and provide them with new pieces for inspiration when we finally get to sing together in church again. So please take advantage of this special and get your copies now. Again, that coupon code is HALLS2020, and the links are in the chat bar here and on the Paraclete Sheet Music website. And also, just as a reminder, in celebration of beginning these Paraclete Music Talkbacks, there's also 25% discount on all organ music. No minimum purchase is required. Use coupon code ORGAN25 at checkout. We hope you enjoyed this time together as much as we did, and we hope you'll join us for more of these Paraclete Music Talkbacks. The calendar is available on our website, paracletesheetmusic.com. Our prayers are with all of you for health and safety. God bless you, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.